One of the problems that I've always had with using video in a primarily still audio-visual is, even though we're using HD videos these days, they never quite match the quality and colour of the still images in the show. Well, perhaps we can put some of that back using the tools of Photoshop. You'll recognise this piece of video from an earlier tutorial. Remember, it was around 6.5 minutes in length, but I only wanted 10 or perhaps 15 seconds top whack. So I'm going to move my cursor to the end of the file. You get that little symbol appear. I'm going to click and drag back. But of course I get to about there, and looking at the thumbnail on the right, I've still got about 50 seconds to go, or a little bit less. So sometimes we may have to just release at that point and use the slider down the bottom just to make the file a little bit bigger. Now it's a little bit tricky, but I've got it there. But now I can pick up the end again. Now I can much easier get to a point, let's say around about 15 seconds. Let's give ourselves a little bit of video to play with, and maybe we'll just move this up a little bit. We can click the little symbols to the left and right of that slider, and that may be an easier way to do this. I think what we're looking at here is going to suit our purposes. Now I've just temporarily muted any sound from our 15-second clip, so if we do have the need to play any of this video while I'm recording, we won't hear any of the background noise. I seem to recall that the background noise of this particular video wasn't something I wish to use in the slideshow anyway. So it's muted and it's out of our way. But if we look at the video itself, it's a little bit overexposed perhaps. Not too much, but just a touch. So it's lacking contrast, it's lacking colour, and therefore it's lacking impact as well. We're going to try and put some of that back using adjustment layers in Photoshop. So I'm going to go over to my layers on the right hand side. Down to the bottom, I'm going to click to apply a new adjustment layer. I'm going to choose something simple here. I'm just going to go for levels for the moment. And you can see the levels that pop up. We can see a little bit of a deficiency here. Let me drag this out a little more and we can see it better, I think. We've got a little bit of a deficiency in the dark tones and a little bit of a deficiency in the light tones. But we can see that we've got scope to do something about that. So let's drag in that toggle on the left. We'll come into that point at the moment, the right to that point, and straight away we've got an improvement in the contrast. I possibly could bring this a little bit further in to where it starts to rise, and I think that looks even better. Do I want to bring this one in? Well, I get a little more sparkle, but I'm also going to tweak the mid-tone. I'm going to drag that to the right a little bit. I'm going to put a little bit of impact into the picture in that way. Now when I'm happy with that, we can go back and I'm going to apply another adjustment layer because I'm pretty happy with what I've done. But does it look a little bit too magenta to you? It may have been that the twigs were wet. I can't now recall, but I don't think so. So I'm going to go back and I'm going to add another adjustment layer. This time I'm going to use hue and saturation because maybe I'll look at the hue. Just going to drop it a little bit towards the blue. See how I can maybe just adjust that a little bit. I'm making minute changes here, I suppose, but a little bit more colour into the background too. To remove the properties from the screen, just click down here to the adjustment layer and it will be removed. Now if we look at these, I've changed the contrast using this one, and if I double click that we should get the option appear again. But in doing so I've darkened the eye a little bit. So what I'm going to do here is I'm just going to select the mask on the right. I'm going to pick up black as my foreground colour. A soft edge brush. I've got a flow rate up there of 5%. And what I can do is just alleviate some of that from the eye. So I'm just lifting the eye a little bit so we get some of the options that we're used to seeing with our still images, but here we're working on a video. Now I still think that this part down here is a little bit on the weak side, so let me see if I can do something about that. I'm going to select the image, add a new adjustment layer. I'm going to go back to my levels here, and this time I'm really going to crank this down quite a lot. I want to darken down the outer edge considerably, and I'm going to go to the mask option here, pick up black, pick up my brush, and I'll make a nice big brush here, because what I want to do here is increase the flow to about 10%, and now I'm just going to lighten the center part. Probably a big brush is needed here, but I'm going to leave the edges nicely shaded, and I think I'd be happy to use that piece of video. So all I need to do now is to render that video ready for use in our slideshow. Now remember, when it comes to muting the sound of a video, we can do this either in Photoshop if we're going to be preparing videos quite often in Photoshop, or we can mute video in Pictures-to-Exe. I don't think there's a right or wrong, but I suppose you could argue that if we did it in Pictures-to-Exe, it's very easy to put that sound back if we want to change our mind. But here I don't think I do, so I'm just going to quickly right click and select the little notes there and drop the volume down, and then File, Export, Render my video. I'll call this my Kookaburra, if I can spell it. I think I've got the spelling right. I don't mind where it's going here, just for demo purposes. Nothing else I want to change here, so I'm going to click to render the video. Now I've actually opened up Windows Explorer here before the rendering process has been completed. And if we take a quick look here, we can see we seem to have two files at the moment. It's creating an audio and a video, but any time soon that will reduce to just one single file, which we called Kookaburra. So when the file pops up, I'm going to double click. I'll open this up full screen and we'll watch the entire 15 seconds. And as you can see, the quality of the video now with regard to contrast and colour is much better.